atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Northern Kentucky University political scientist Michael Baranowski. I'm joined today by political scientist Michael Levy.
Good morning, Michael.
Hey, Michael. As I mentioned, there are a number of things we didn't get to, in part because we wanted to at least start our initial thoughts on what was going on in Venezuela. So we can just go ahead and get right to it. And this kind of actually is connected to that in a way. On December 1st of last year, CBS News pulled the 60 Minutes investigative piece Inside CCOT shortly before it was going to air. And the segment, which both of us had the opportunity to watch, detailed the alleged torture and abuse of Venezuelan migrants deported to El Salvador CCOT prison by the Trump administration. Now, the piece had passed the standard legal and editorial vetting at 60 Minutes, but CBS's newly appointed editor-in-chief, Bari Weiss, ordered it off the broadcast anyway, saying that it wasn't ready and needed additional reporting, particularly in the form of on-camera interviews with administration officials who had declined to participate. Now, producers at 60 Minutes and the correspondent who did the piece, Sharon Alfonsi, called the decision political and warned that requiring official participation before segments air, in effect, gives those in power a veto over investigative reporting that focuses on them. Now, the decision has led to a certain amount of internal dissent within CBS News, as well as a broader backlash. Critics have asserted that it undermines journalistic norms, and it also reflects what they see as a shift in editorial posture of CBS News under Weiss's leadership and Paramount Skydance ownership. So the question here, I think, is less about what's going on at CCOT, though I do want to get into that, at least based on what we saw, but rather if CBS is reorienting toward accommodating the Trump administration at the expense of rigorous, independent journalism. And if so, what this means for the future of American investigative journalism. So, Michael, what do you think about Weiss stepping in and pulling this Inside CCOT story?
So first, it shows that Bari Weiss at some level is a little bit disconnected from the day-to-day operations because she had ample opportunity to get involved earlier. She pulled the segment after it had already gone through rigorous fact-checking, had already gone through all of the legal channels. And it worries me, not that the piece was pulled, but why the piece was pulled. And that is around the Trump administration declining to participate and wanting them to have on-camera interviews. And that just seems ludicrous to me because it effectively gives the government or an administration a kill switch, as Alfonsi called it, over investigative journalism. Hey, we're not going to give you a comment on this. And so, and if Bari Weiss's view is we're not going to run a story because the administration won't give a comment on it, then what happens if the Democrats come in 2029 and they don't want to cooperate with investigative journalism? Does that just give administrative official? And so what worries me is that doesn't exist in isolation. There's obviously a through line between what we've also seen at the Pentagon and Pete Hegseth in the Defense Department and evolving rules for journalism, where access and fairness increasingly means compliance with whatever the administration wants. And so you can report, but only if you play by the rules designed to protect those in power from discomfort. And so it worries me on a lot of levels. But when we go into the actual Inside CCOT piece, and I know I sent you that link because it took me a while to find it, even though I know it had been leaked online or had been shown online in Canada, not because of nefariousness, just because it had already been sent out to these other outlets around the world, is that it didn't break any new reporting. Everything in there I had already known or already had seen. And I think that was also one of Bari Weiss's comments about the investigative reporting is that, well, this was nothing new and this had already been rehashed elsewhere. And that seems to take away from the role that 60 Minutes has had in our lives, is that 60 Minutes is not some niche publication. It is in many ways, the investigative journalism show of record in the United States. And if you want the most eyeballs on something, you get it on 60 Minutes. And so I'm worried about it, A, because of this precedent that it might set and where Bari Weiss is perhaps taking 60 Minutes and where the administration is trying to go and kind of gagging journalists from doing their activities. But also, there wasn't that much new in the show. And we can get into that in a little.
Yeah, I think to emphasize the importance of 60 Minutes, I mean, it's been the number one ranked news show for something like 51 straight years, and it's not even close. In an average week, they pull something between like 8 and 12 million viewers. You compare that to the nightly network news, which kind of second 6 to 8 million maybe nightly, or Fox, 2.5 to 3 million. So that's a lot of eyeballs. But more than that is that if you take a look and kind of aggregate a lot of the polling data around this, the 60 Minutes audience, while they're generally kind of center-left, self-identified Democrats do outnumber Republicans by around 10 to 15 points, but there are also a large number of self-identified independents, and you can really, I think it's fair to say that 60 Minutes is the most influential news show that genuinely reaches a mixed partisanship audience. That is a rare thing. To mess with the credibility of that show, I think, is a very dangerous. This isn't, like you said, this isn't some niche sort of publication. This is 60 Minutes, and it is a big deal, which is why the argument, I think, that, well, everyone knows this. Well, no, everyone who is super politically attentive, you and I know this, and most of our listeners know that, but a lot of average Americans don't. And I'll tell you, when I saw, even though I knew that, watching that report and seeing these people, I mean, these actual individuals who had been detained, and seeing the conditions, and seeing the head of that prison practically crow about how wonderful it is, how inhumane they are, and actually seeing those conditions, it honestly sickened me in a way that just reading a report wouldn't. And so that's why I think that's so very important. I'm sure you had a similar reaction to actually watching that segment.
Yeah, two things. I mean, one is on the Inside CCOT piece itself. It was, while there weren't many new things, I think one of the new things that did come out for me was Kristi Noem's press conference, or video that she recorded in front of the detainees. And these were El Salvadorans who were gang members with MS-13 tattoos, and that they weren't even the Venezuelans or the folks who were removed from the United States. Because what it showed in the piece was that only 3.1% of the folks who were housed at CCOT, who were removed from the United States, were actually violent criminals, and that almost 50%, I think the number is 48.8, had no criminal history whatsoever. So it does undermine the view that we were getting rid of the worst and all these criminals. But to go to the internal CBS stuff that I think is particularly interesting is that in internal defense memos to the staff, Bari Weiss emphasized the pursuit of fairness and rebuilding public trust in journalism as a rationale. And what I don't understand is, how does pulling this clip, and I'm trying to get into the heads of conservatives and folks who are not me, how does pulling this rebuild public trust in journalism? Doesn't this actually undermine public trust in journalism? And so I'm kind of wondering how you might square that circle, or maybe you can give me a conservative counter-argument as to how pulling it can rebuild trust.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Well, I think the argument is a logically flawed one, because I think a lot of folks on the right would argue that what they see as fairness is what I believe is actually would be false equivalence, because if one side happens to be ignoring rule of law or doing morally repugnant things, like sending 252 Venezuelans, the vast majority of which were not hardened criminals or terrorists, over to a place where they knew they would be tortured, Even if they were violent criminals and terrorists, I still think that would be a fundamental violation of human rights. That is just so very wrong. And arguing that, well, you need to make sure that the administration gets equal point, that's false balance. That's false equivalence. And so there are times when badness just has to be called out, and there is no reweighing it. I don't think there are necessarily good arguments. And let's be clear, the Trump administration had ample opportunity to comment on this. It's one thing. Barry Weiss would be right if, say, the 60 Minutes team they were going to air in a week and they said, listen, Kristi Noem, State Department, whatever, we're going to give you better say something right now before this goes there. That's an ambush, and that would not be okay. But reporting indicates that Alfonsi requested an interview with Noem about a month before the piece was going to be aired and followed up multiple times with additional requests, and all of those requests were ignored. And so, I mean, what are you going to do? I think the 60 Minutes team did the right thing. And Barry Weiss, I think Barry Weiss, she's obviously a smart person and she knows what she's doing. I believe she knows this is just a false equivalence, but she also knows that Donald Trump has his issues in the past with 60 Minutes, and she wants to set up CBS News and 60 Minutes as more conservative friendly. I think it's a lot more about audience share and making sure that the administration is not going to be out to put 60 Minutes and CBS News as a part of the Trump vengeance tour more than anything else. I don't think journalistic integrity really enters into it except as sort of at most a tertiary sort of thing.
So I want to get snarky for a second. Can you remind me what the name of Barry Weiss's publication that she founded is called?
Yeah, that's right.
It's the Free Press, right?
Exactly.
And so, but I do, on the Inside CCOP piece, I have said that I didn't learn anything new, but video is certainly very visceral. And, seeing and listening to the folks talk about the beatings and the sexual assaults and beating of genitals, it did look, make it feel like it was worse than a Russian gulag. And talking about the island where there's no light and it's a totally isolated room with beatings, and whether or not this violates, Geneva Conventions and other, if we're going to say that these folks are combatants in some illegal war against the United States. But I do wonder if 8 to 12 million Americans did view this, and particularly independents, how they would actually view. Since Trump has gotten generally good poll ratings on immigration and the deportations. Yes, there's a very loud minority of us on the left who've decried the way that the Trump administration has gone about the deportations. Trump has generally gotten good marks. I wonder if MAGA folks or independents saw this, if they might change their views, or again, are we just locked into our own, our typical corners, and that it's really only the independents who are likely to change their minds?
I guess that's the scariest and most potentially depressing thing to me, is that it's clear to me that President Trump not only condones but takes pride in dehumanizing certain people and has no problem with sending people off to be tortured. What scares me more than that, what saddens me more than that, is I fear that tens of millions of Americans agree with that if you are, quote unquote, a bad guy, well, then you don't deserve a basic standard of humane treatment. And that to me is wow, that is for a supposedly Christian nation, that is a profoundly anti-Christian sort of thing. And to me, it just is, like I said, I've used the term before, it's the best term I can think of, morally repugnant. And to think that tens of millions of Americans may share that view, that to me is just, wow, just profoundly depressing.
I'm not going to swear, I promise, but it reminds me at some level when you're talking about this tens of millions of Americans who might support this kind of action. And it reminds me, I don't know if you saw the movie in 2004, Team America, World Police. It's like, America, F yeah. It's like, whatever we do, it's like, oh, and this goes back to the Venezuela, the capture or the seizure of Maduro, that there are some, knee-jerk folks who will see this as like, yeah, America's going and we're taking out these leaders and we're getting the bad bad guys and stuff like that. It's just going to, it feeds into folks who are kind of reflexively supportive, even if it violates international norms, standards, conventions, Geneva conventions, whatever the case may be. So it is quite depressing, but it's a typical rally around the flag kind of thing that you would expect.
And I think that's one bubble that so many of us are in, both left and right. I think that we don't realize is that, of course, so many of us see America as the good guys, as the we're fighting for freedom and all that sort of thing. But I think it's important to pull out of that bubble occasionally and see how much of the rest of the world sees us. I mean, it's like, I think of it as like, for years, for almost a generation, I had a passionate, intense hatred for the New England Patriots, as did all right-thinking football fans, right? Because they seemed to be this arrogant dynasty who played by their own rules, but they just won, And so times that by like orders of magnitude is how so much of the rest of the world often sees the United States. We can't appreciate that in our bubble, but because we want to believe so much that we are the good guys, and I think in a lot of ways we often are. But if we just adopt that stance as a reflexive stance and don't actually start thinking about, wait a second, in this instance, are we doing the morally correct thing? And I think the best way to do that is to kind of flip the roles. Would we be okay if someone took American citizens and deported them to third countries that would torture them? Hell no. We hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters-exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo or @politicsguys or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,